Please come in. You're right on time. The door only opens when the clock strikes midnight. Georgia and Hannah are preparing to broadcast from the belfry. Just like this old bell tower, they have many stories to tell. Some old and some new. Follow me up these stairs, but mind your step. Ah, they're waiting for you.
Recording in progress.
Oh, God.
This is gonna be my next character voice.
Oh, please, no.
This is how my character's gonna interpret the Aaron's campaign.
I can't even tell what I'm saying. Never mind.
Uh-huh.
Why am I making myself laugh so much? Okay. Man. I've never done that voice before. I can't wait to do it all the time. Today we're learning about the story of Bluebeard. The most well-known version was written by Charles Perrault and first published in 1697. Time machine. Fun fact, he also...
Time travel in progress.
Yep. He also published versions of Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, which, like Bluebeard, were existing folktales, but the stories we recognize today are still pretty similar to his versions. He also wrote Little Red Riding Hood as well as a cautionary tale about the dangers of women trusting men.
Okay.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
Here we are, 300 years later, and nothing has changed. Do you know anything about the story of Bluebeard?
I genuinely know nothing.
Okay, great. I'm going to read a version from this book, Women Who Run with the Wolves, Myths and Stories of the Wild Woman Archetype. We love her. It's by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. She is a Jungian psychoanalyst.
Oh.
So you're going to be stuck with me reading this, but the rest of you are probably going to hear a nice dramatic reading by Shannon that hasn't been recorded yet, so...
Oh, you don't want them to hear you reading it? What the heck?
I mean, they could. I just thought it'd be more fun and dramatic if it,
Well, yeah.
you know...
I don't know. You could do it fun and dramatic, too. I have
I'm
faith in
gonna
your
do
abilities.
this voice again. Wait, that's not the voice, but I already forgot what that voice
I already forgot. I left my brain almost immediately. I was like, I can't think about this anymore.
I'm also going to read this little paragraph beforehand.
Okay.
She says, in North America, the best-known Bluebeard versions are the French and German, but I prefer my literary version in which the French and the Slavic are mingled, like the one given to me by my Aunt Katie, who lived in Hungary. Among our cadre of farm women tellers, the Bluebeard tale is begun with an anecdote about someone who knew someone who knew someone who had seen the grisly proof of Bluebeard's demise. And so we begin. There is a hank of beard which is kept at the convent of the White Nuns in the far mountains. How it came to the convent no one knows. Some say it was the nuns who buried what was left of his body, for no one else would touch it. Why the nuns would keep such a relic is unknown, but it is true. My friend's friend has seen it with her own eyes. She says the beard is blue, indigo color to be exact. It is as blue as the dark ice in the lake, as blue as the shadow of a hole at night. This beard was once worn by one who they say was a failed magician, a giant man with an eye for women, a man known by the name of Bluebeard. 'Twas said he courted 3 sisters at the same time, but they were frightened of his beard with its odd blue cast, so they hid when he called. In an effort to convince them of his geniality, he invited them on an outing in the forest. He arrived leading horses arrayed in bells and crimson ribbons. He set the sisters and their mother upon the horses, and off they cantered into the forest. There they had a most wonderful day riding, and their dogs ran beside and ahead. Later they stopped beneath a giant tree, and Bluebeard regaled them with stories and fed them dainty treats. The sisters began to think, well, perhaps this man Bluebeard is not so bad after all. They returned home all a chatter about how interesting the day had been, and did they not have a good time? Yet the two older sisters' suspicions and fears returned, and they vowed not to see Bluebeard again. But the youngest sister thought that if a man could be that charming, then perhaps he was not so bad. The more she talked to herself, the less awful he seemed, and also the less blue his beard. So when Bluebeard asked for her hand in marriage, she accepted. She had given his proposal great thought and felt she was to marry a very elegant man. Marry they did, and after rode off to his castle in the woods. One day he came to her and said, I must go away for a time. Invite your family here if you like. You may ride in the woods, charge the cooks to set you a feast. You may do anything you like, anything your heart desires. In fact, here is my ring of keys. You may open any and every door to the storerooms, the money rooms, any door in the castle. This tiny little key, the one with the scrollwork on top, do not use. His bride replied, Yes, I will do as you ask. It all sounds very fine. So go, my dear husband, and do not have a worry, and come back soon. And so off he rode, and she stayed. Her sisters came to visit, and they were, as all souls are, very curious about what the master had said was to be done while he was away. The young wife gaily told them. He said we may do anything we desire and enter any room we wish except one. But I don't know which one it is. I just have a key, and I don't know which door it fits. The sisters decided to make a game of finding which key fit which door. The castle was 3 stories high, with 100 doors in each wing, and as there were many keys on the ring, they crept from door to door, having an immensely good time throwing open each door. Behind one were kitchen stores, behind another the money stores. All manner of holdings were behind the doors, and everything seemed more wonderful all the time. At last, having seen all these marvels, they finally came to the cellar, and at the end of the corridor, a blank wall. They puzzled over the last key, the one with the scroll work on top. Maybe this key doesn't fit anything at all. As they said this, they heard an odd sound.
Bruh.
That's written in the story.
Oh, wow.
Like E-R-R-R-R-R-R-R-R.
Here.
They peeked around the corner, and lo and behold, there was a small door just closing. When they tried to open it again, it was firmly locked. One cried, Sister, sister, bring your key. Surely this is the door for that mysterious little key. Without a thought, one of the sisters put the key in the door and turned it. The lock scolded. The door swung open, but it was so dark inside they could not see. Sister, sister, bring a candle. And so a candle was lit and held into the room, and all 3 women screamed at once, for in the room was a mire of blood, and the blackened bones of corpses were flung about, and skulls were stacked in corners like pyramids of apples. They slammed the door shut, shook the key out of the lock, and leaned against one another, gasping, breasts heaving. My God, my God. The wife looked down at the key and saw it was stained with blood. Horrified, she used the skirt of her gown to wipe it clean, but the blood prevailed. Oh no, she cried. Each sister took the tiny key in her hands and tried to make it as it once was, but the blood remained. The wife hid the tiny key in her pocket and ran to the cook's kitchen. When she arrived, her white dress was stained red from pocket to hem, for the key was slowly weeping drops of dark red blood. She ordered the cook, Quick, give me some horsehair. She scoured the key, but it would not stop bleeding. Drop after drop of pure red blood issued from the tiny key. She took the key outdoors, and from the oven she pressed ashes onto it and scrubbed some more. She held it to the heat to sear it. She laid cobweb over it to staunch the flow, but nothing could make the weeping blood subside. Oh, what am I to do?
Oh no!
Oh, no!
What am I gonna do? My toe! My key!
Oh, what am I to do? She cried. I knew you would do that. I know. I'll put the little key away. I'll put it in the wardrobe. I'll close the door. This is a bad dream. All will be all right. And this she did do. Her husband came home the very next morning, and he strode into the castle calling for his wife. Well, how was it while I was away? It was very fine, sir. And how are my storerooms? He rumbled. Very fine, sir. How are my money rooms? He growled. The money rooms are very fine also, sir. So everything is good, wife. Yes, everything is good. Well, he whispered, then you best return my keys. Within a glance, he saw a key was missing. Where is the smallest key? I lost it. Yes, I lost it. I was out riding, and the key fell down, and I must have lost a key. Could I say key any more times? What have you done with it, woman? I don't remember. Don't lie to me. Tell me what you did with that key. He put his hand to her face as if to caress her cheek, but instead he seized her hair. You infidel, he snarled, and threw her to the floor. You've been into the room, haven't you? He threw open her wardrobe, and the little key on the top shelf had bled blood red down all the beautiful silks of her gowns hanging there. Now it's your turn, my lady, he screamed, and dragged her down the hall and into the cellar till they were before the terrible door. Bluebeard merely looked at the door with his fiery eyes, and the door opened for him. There lay the skeletons of all his previous wives. And now, he roared. But she caught hold of the door frame and would not let go. She pleaded for her life. Please, please allow me to compose myself and prepare for my death. Give me but a quarter hour before you take my life so I can make my peace with God. All right, he snarled. You have but a quarter of an hour, but be ready. The wife raced upstairs to her chamber and posted her sisters on the castle ramparts. She knelt to pray, but instead called out to her sisters. Sisters, sisters, do you see our brothers coming? We see nothing, nothing on the open plains. Every few moments she cried up to the ramparts. Sisters, sisters, do you see our brothers coming? We see a whirlwind, perhaps a dust devil in the distance. Meanwhile, Bluebeard roared for his wife to come to the cellar so he could behead her. Again she called out, Sisters, sisters, do you see our brothers coming? Bluebeard shouted for his wife again and began to clump up the stone steps. Her sisters cried out, Yes, we see them. Our brothers are here, and they have just entered the castle. Can you imagine, having this conversation, yelling from a window? Bluebeard strode down the hall towards his wife's chamber. I am coming to get you, he bellowed. His footfalls were dense, the rocks in the hallway came loose. The sand from the mortar poured onto the floor. As Bluebeard lumbered into her chamber with his hands outstretched to seize her, her brothers on horseback galloped down the castle hallway and charged into her room as well. There they routed Bluebeard out onto the parapet. There and then, with swords, they advanced upon him, striking and slashing, cutting and whipping, beating Bluebeard down to the ground, killing him at last, and leaving for the buzzards his blood and gristle. The end.
This is a good story. It was a mighty good story.
Do you have any initial takeaways or thoughts or reactions?
I want to go back over how was his beard blue again? Because you said it at the top that there was like some suspicion about it being seen as blue. But then I got so distracted with the rest of the story that I just completely forgot.
It doesn't really say why it's blue.
No.
Like, there's never a reason given.
Wasn't it something about the moonlight? Or am I just tripping?
No, that was just like an analogy.
Oh, okay.
Like, talking about the color. It never really says why his beard is blue. Just was kind of weird that it is. But they did describe him as a failed magician, so maybe that had something to do with it.
Yeah. I love women.
Well, we'll come back to this.
Okay.
I have a thought, but we'll come back to it. One criticism of this version of the story, which she outright says at the beginning, like, I've combined the Slavic version and the French version.
Mm-hmm.
But one criticism of her book in general is that the stories conflate too many versions from across cultures, and that disregards the nuances of folklore studies, which is apparently a thing that Jungian psychologists do. But I don't know a whole lot about that other than what I learned about Jung in theory and the collective conscious and that kind of thing. So on the one hand, I understand that folklore studies do have nuances, but on the other hand, that's the point of the collective conscious, is that so many similar stories exist across cultures with similar messages and similar meanings, right?
Collective conscious, do you think that is real? Do you think it's a thing?
Scientifically, no. But we've talked about it before. It is really interesting that a lot of mythologies have flood stories.
Mhm.
A lot of stories exist within different cultures with similar things, and that's a thing. I wouldn't say it's a collective conscious, but it's a thing. It's very demonstrative of humanity.
Can you imagine if there was a collective conscious that's like a sleeper agent kind of thing?
And like one day we're all just awoken to it collectively or individually?
Collectively. Like something happens.
And we're all just tapped into this mega mind.
Yeah. That would be cool.
Would that be enlightenment?
No. The rapture.
So it's a very curiosity almost killed the cat situation. But very specifically, it's about women's curiosity because women shouldn't be curious.
Right. Women should listen to men.
Yeah.
Or rather, wives should listen to their husbands.
Their husbands, yeah. There have been comparisons to both Pandora and Psyche from Greek mythology, you know. Pandora's curiosity is very famous, to Eve for taking the apple in the Bible, and even more recently, Beauty and the Beast. We'll come back to that in a second.
Okay.
There are several interpretations of the story or the symbolism within the story depending on your perspective. So the one we could argue is what was intended in this story, and others like it, is that telling women to follow societal rules, give in to the patriarchy, or you'll be punished. This was suggested by a Harvard folklorist named Maria. My thing auto-corrected it. I want to say it's Tatar. It's Tatar.
Tatar. Tatar.
Yeah.
Tater.
Tater. That's what my Google Doc auto-corrected it to Tater.
Nice.
So she's the one who compared the story to Beauty and the Beast, in that they are basically opposite ends of the same spectrum. The purpose of Beauty and the Beast, she says, was to condition young women for marrying while they are still too young, really. Probably someone that was going to be a lot older than them. And the Beast showing compassion was supposed to dampen their fears of both marriage and sex with this old man. And Belle's falling in love represented her placation with the system, which is the opposite of what happens in this story. So that's one interpretation.
That's one look at Beauty and the Beast. I think it was also similarly about, like, no one being intelligent enough to realize that the Beast is also a human being with a curse.
Yes, I think...
And is more actually a nuanced and...
Yes, it's
like a
more...
polymath and all this shit.
Don't judge a book by its cover kind of thing is what I always took away from Beauty and the Beast, because you have the handsome, strong, manly man who's the real villain of the story. And then the hideous
beast
thing
that is actually
the hero of the story.
Yeah, that is kind, but just scared, and people have been prejudiced to be terrified of this ugly, horrifying, powerful beast. And
also... Man, I know a lot of people joke about like the Stockholm Syndrome thing. I fucking hate that. I hate it so much.
Belle did very clearly make her choice, that when she was given the chance to go away, she was like, I don't want to leave you, but my father is hurt.
Yeah.
And I love my father. Yeah. And she left.
Yeah.
And she just didn't want anybody to get hurt. She just wants everybody to be happy.
Yeah.
She also got to have access to his library, and she loved books, bro.
Yeah. So. And Gaston can't even read, so...
He can't even read.
I do really want to Shannon and I to be Belle and Gaston for Halloween sometime.
Oh, God. But that's gross, because Gaston is not, you know...
Well, yeah, but look at him.
Okay.
Shannon can do him really well.
He can also be the Beast. He's just as hairy.
Well, yeah.
sorry, Shannon.
He did just come in here without a shirt on, so.
I forgot about that entirely.
Another interpretation. I'll tell you what it is, and then you can tell me who you think influenced this Austrian psychologist named Bruno Bettelheim. He interpreted the key as a penis. Especially during the first intercourse when blood gets on it, and the blood on the key is symbolic of the wife's indiscretion.
Fuck off.
But also, not all women bleed the first time they have sex.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why this thing bothers me so much, but like, what the fuck? Anyway.
It's because women bleed, or people with vaginas, when you have penis in vagina.
Yeah.
Or object in vagina sex, forcefully, you bleed.
True. I'm quite sure that was happening a lot more, especially between married couples in this time. Especially
you got so much louder when you got closer to the mic. It's okay. You're easier to hear.
Especially with young wives and crusty old husbands.
Right. In these stories, yeah.
We all watched Queen Charlotte. Well, some of us did.
Yeah. Lady Danbury.
She's such a queen.
She's so cool.
I love her. Another suggestion by a guy named Philip Lewis is that the key represents Bluebeard's superiority because he has knowledge that she doesn't have, and by using the key, she has gained that knowledge and has made them equal. And men don't like to be equal to women. Which I thought was an interesting perspective.
That's an interesting interpretation.
Yeah. Our author, Clarissa here, she believes that the story of Bluebeard illustrates the predator. Well, it's not just Bluebeard. I mean, this whole book is about like the wild woman archetype, right? So the argument she makes specifically in this chapter about Bluebeard is that he illustrates the predator that lives within the mind of each woman. And the predator is specifically a man, like a subconscious male voice, the voice of the patriarchy, that tries to force women to be what they should be, you know, like innocent and naive and quiet and well-behaved and submissive and all that. And this predator cuts the woman's psyche off from her creativity and her feelings and her ideas. And by becoming curious, like the wife in the story, we learn to trust our instincts, and we can grow and like recognize this predator and drive it out of our minds and like stay alive and thrive.
All right.
I do think there's a lot to be said about, especially even today, there's still a lot to be said about women trusting their instincts. There's a book called The Gift of Fear, which is all about that. That is by Gavin de Becker. 10 out of 10 recommend for anyone who is trying to learn to trust their instincts. But it also reminds me of My Favorite Murder. It's like, be rude, stay alive.
Yeah. Be rude, be weird.
Be rude and, you know.
I've heard be weird.
I can't remember exactly. I know it's something about being rude and surviving.
Yeah.
Okay, switching gears a little bit. In more recent decades, the presence of Orientalism has been a hot topic in illustrations of Bluebeard.
Which we should reiterate, Orientalism is a shitty word.
Yes.
Yeah, it's an antiquated term.
Right. One theory for this is the fact that in French, the word for beard and the word for barbarian are extremely close. Which for societal reasons at the time led to stage productions like operas and pantomimes, as well as illustrations, having this Middle Eastern look, which is very vague, I know, but that's the identifier that was coming up in what I was reading. Other than, if it did get specific, it said Turkish. So do with that information what you will.
I mean, I know exactly what you're saying.
Maybe more interesting to us is the other potential reason, which was also put forth by our folklorist Maria Tater, Sorry. Which is that a particular collection of Middle Eastern stories, 1001 Nights, aka Arabian Nights, in 1888 was translated into English by Sir Richard motherfucking Burton.
Sure was.
She argued that this heavily influenced like the vibe at the time. You know?
He was a popular dude.
Yes.
Sucks.
And one of the stories in that collection is about a Persian king who, like, Bluebeard had several dead wives prior to the beginning of the story. And so they think that there was like some conflation there or that kind of thing, influence. There are a couple of different people believed to have influenced the character of Bluebeard. One of them is called Connemore the Accursed. Connemore was an early medieval Breton ruler, notorious for being cruel. He ruled Brittany, obviously. And potentially maybe Cornwall, had some presence in England. In one account, he's referred to as a ruler of different peoples of 4 languages. So, I don't know. France was not France at that time. It was a lot of, different kingdoms. So, different little...
Some of the Normans or whatever.
The Normans, the Bretons. Yeah. We'll talk more about France in a minute. Actually, most of this is in France because, that's where Charles Perrault is from. But anyway, he may or may not have become a ruler by murdering his predecessor. And then he had a few wives. I don't know. It's hard to say because it was fairly early on. And there are a lot of similarly named people that pop up. And it's hard to kind of separate who did what and what's attributed to whom and that kind of stuff. So another guy is called Henri Landru, the Bluebeard of... Oh, I forgot to look up how to pronounce this village. It's in France, but it's Gambai. So like Gambay, maybe? Jambay? I'm not really sure.
I don't know how to do G's in French. Let me look it up real quick. Hello? Are you going to play? Gambay.
Okay.
Gambay. That's easy.
Gumby?
Gambay. Gambay.
Gumby. Okay.
Gumby.
That creepy fucker. Henri. He's convicted of murdering 11 people, 10 women and 1 teenage boy between 1914 and 1919, though, according to his Wikipedia page, police found that he was in correspondence with 283 women during World War I. So kind of just picture him being that, like, swiping right on every single Tinder profile.
Right, exactly.
72 of these women could never be tracked down, which, like, World War I was happening, so a lot of people did go missing and were unaccounted for in World War I, but also they were just very suspicious that he had a reputation of murdering people, and these people were never heard from again. But the figure most famously referred to as the real-life Bluebeard was Gilles de Rais. Do you know anything about Gilles de Rais?
No, tell me, Georgia.
Do you really not?
I really don't.
Okay.
Only what you've told me. Sorry, not sorry.
He was born sometime between 1396 and 1406. It's not really written down anywhere. The best estimate...
The way you started that, I thought you were going to be like, he was number 1.
He... Yeah.
Harry?
The best estimate of 1405 for his birth year comes from a document found that described him as being 14 or 15 in February of 1422. So we already have really great details about his life here. By 1415, both of his parents are dead.
Yep.
So...
Slay.
He's, what, like 7?
Yeah.
8? His uncle had just been killed in the Battle of Agincourt, so Gilles, along with his younger brother, was adopted by his grandfather, and the 2 brothers became the heirs of his estate. Now, in the fall of 1425, we can confirm that Gilles de Rais is now in the entourage of the king, which at the time was Charles VII of France, obviously. And the king was also protecting the Rais family interests by getting land returned to him. So he obviously has powerful friends despite not even being 20 years old yet, or being around 20 years old. And it's at this time when English forces from the House of Lancaster are also encroaching upon the Angevin borders. This is the period of English history where the houses of York and Lancaster are constantly fighting over which of them is entitled to the crown. And John, Duke of Bedford, who is from the House of Lancaster, he's Henry IV's son and brother of who would become Henry V. He claims that he's entitled to Anjou. That's part of his duchy, basically, his lands.
His douche.
Yeah, his douche. And I'm no expert, but I did read that Yolanda of Aragon was King Charles's mother-in-law, and I would assume that this is why Henry VIII eventually married Catherine of Aragon to unite the families after this period we now know as the 100 Years' War, and like form that alliance, smooth out those historical bubbles, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's in this ongoing war against England that Gilles de Rais comes to fight alongside Joan of Arc. They campaign together to clear out English and Burgundian forces, because Burgundy was allied with England. Joan of Arc obviously was captured by the Burgundians and burned at the stake for acts of heresy, which included wearing men's clothes. That was blasphemy. And acting upon demonic visions, amongst other things. And some believe that Gilles de Rais was part of a military expedition to free her. And though there was a military expedition in that area, whether or not that's what its purpose was is not clear. Though some people think that it was this loss of Joan of Arc that kind of broke him and led to him making poor decisions and ultimately going a bit crazy. By the early 1430s, so he's like 25?
Yeah. He's not just that old.
No. He just kind of withdrew from everything. He was probably broke after the war. He was like selling off bits of his land and like his estates to get money to fund like his war efforts. And the king had kind of shunned him, it seemed like, for not winning all of his battles and that kind of thing. And he just kind of gave up. There are a lot of incomplete documents about like his assets that came out later, like when his heirs were going through things and trying to break up his estate. There's a lot of incomplete documents, and then there's also exaggerated documents about his properties from like people who were trying to delegitimize stuff that the king had given him or that kind of thing. And a lot of pages from minutes and registers that were recording like, you know, meetings that he was at and that kind of thing. In the 1800s, well, since the 1800s, they've just been missing. Like the page has just been taken out and is gone for whatever reason.
Maybe it got burned. Maybe someone shoved it in their boot and then it rotted away.
So in the late 1430s, he would confess that he started seeking out people who knew alchemy and occult arts so that he could regain his wealth and power with some help from demons, as you do. And he was arrested in 1440 after being accused of abducting, torturing, and murdering approximately 150 children.
Oh my god.
To quote one of his biographers, which that should sound kind of familiar.
The children killing?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
A large number of them.
Yeah.
To quote one of his biographers, he was accused of the abominable and execrable sin of sodomy in various fashions and with unheard of perversions that cannot presently be expounded upon by reason of their horror, but will be disclosed in Latin at the appropriate time and place. So, like ye old 15th century people were like, we cannot say this in English. We'll say it in Latin so only a few people can understand what we're saying. That's how terrible it was.
God.
He said that he confessed that he committed his first assaults on children between spring of 1432 and 1433, and his first murders occurred at his castle, but no account of them survived of like these, accounts of the murders. And shortly after, he moved elsewhere, where he killed or ordered to be killed a large but uncertain number of children after he sodomized them. In 1971, one biography of Gilles de Rais tells the story of children who fell into his hands. The boy was pampered and dressed in better clothes than he had ever known. The evening began with a large meal and heavy drinking, particularly hippocras, which I forgot to look up what that was, which acted as a stimulant. The boy was then taken to an upper room to which only Gilles and his immediate circle were admitted. There he was confronted with the true nature of his situation. The shock thus produced on the boy was an initial source of pleasure for Gilles. He first refused to plead the charges, but was threatened with excommunication and declared himself guilty, which, why would the threat of excommunication matter to someone who is trying to form a pact with the devil?
Oh, God. Fucking...
Oh, boy.
I saw the door move, and I was like, jump scare.
What? You want to come out?
No, she doesn't.
She wants to hang on there? Okay.
Yep. Right. That's the seventh red flag in this situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who cares? But it didn't matter. He was tried for... he did declare himself not guilty after the threat of excommunication. It didn't matter anyway, because he was tried for heresy and sentenced to death by hanging. Fast forward to 1992. This is what I was looking up this morning. So I saw this article last night and was like, I'll come back to that. Fast forward to 1992. The area of his castle... quite the tourist destination. So the Breton Tourist Board decides they're going to commission a book about the serial killer that's, making them money. They hire a French author who instead wrote about how Gilles de Rais was in fact innocent and called for a retrial almost 600 years later. And do you know what? They did it, and Gilles de Rais was fully exonerated.
Oh.
And this wasn't really a secret in France. I thought this was really interesting. It wasn't really a secret in France, and it's still not something that the majority of English speakers have heard. And part of that is because most of his biographers don't mention it because they
His exoneration?
Yes. Oh. Because they want to keep him as this, terrifying, notorious serial killer image, because it's more interesting. Which I think the fact that he was that and got exonerated 600 years later is more interesting. But part of it is because the few things that have been written about it were all in French, and the exoneration happened before we had the internet, so it just wasn't accessible to anyone outside of France, really. It might have made a headline, and that was it, and everyone forgot about it. In 2010, a woman named Margot Juby in England, she started running this website literally called Gilles de Rais Was Innocent. And she began to write what she believed to be the first accurate biography. And she talks a lot about how he was framed, and it's literally just like Elizabeth Bathory, same story. She said it seems impossibly quaint in the 21st century to read a text that fully accepts the validity of an Inquisition trial with the use of torture. So all of his confessions, he was being tortured.
I'm so surprised.
I know.
In the 1400s?
She found out that 2 of the judges made business deals with him, and that if he, just like Elizabeth, if he were found guilty of a crime, they would get his property. Literally no physical evidence was ever found. The biographer that wrote that first book in 1992, he wrote, "Nothing, not a clue, not a tooth, not a hair, not one witness who can say, 'I have seen,' not a weeping mother who claims, 'There is the dress stained with the blood of my dead daughter,' not a father who brings a child's heart ripped from its chest and wrapped in spotted cloth." Dramatic. But, just making the point that, no one, just like with Elizabeth Bathory, no one could provide an accurate witness testimony that said, "I saw this, and here's the evidence."
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. just to end this part with another quote from Margot. I love that name. She says, "We no longer believe the evidence in any of the witch trials. We no longer believe the Knights Templar were some kind of satanic cult." Yes, all true. And then she goes on to say, "I always had a feeling I was supposed to do something, but I didn't know what. I am proud to be Gilles de Rais' representative on Earth."
Aw.
She kind of reminds me of, what's her name? That Richard III lady.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. Maybe not quite as crazy as her, but...
Yeah. But 140 children, that is a
lot.
Well, that is like a stark accusation.
Yeah, well, I mean, Elizabeth Bathory was accused of even more than that.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, where did they get these numbers? Is this, they're just saying, like, this is an excuse for these kids that probably got killed by the plague?
Yeah.
Like,
if that number of kids even went missing, but, you know, like we talked about, when we talked about Elizabeth Bathory, you would notice if that many children went missing, and it would appear in the historical record.
Yeah.
As an anomaly, and it didn't. So I was going to talk about a couple other like Blackbeard adaptations real quick. Charles Dickens
Bluebeard.
Yes, Bluebeard. It's got pirates on the brain. Charles Dickens wrote his own version called Captain Murderer.
Love it. Good job, Charles Dickens.
In 1860, which just throws in some cannibalism to the story. Mm-hmm. We love cannibalism. There is, again, on that podcast, that Lovecraft podcast I listened to, there was a story by Angela Carter called The Bloody Chamber. It's set in the 1920s. And so, like, Bluebeard is this very, you know, he's kind of like a Gatsby type figure, very, like, decadent lifestyle. But in this one, the bride is saved by her mother instead of her brothers. So, like, there's a little more female agency. And I saw an article, which I will link to. It's kind of a blog post, but it was someone who is obsessed with this story, and they've, like, read all different adaptations, and they, like, any type of, like, Bluebeard adaptation, they have consumed that media, you know? Like, they're doing this deep dive. And they were saying that they wanted to write their own version of Bluebeard where the woman saves herself. And as she was writing it, she just realized, this is the script of Crimson Peak.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, I fucking love that movie. And I had, like, the look on my face like, oh, holy shit, she's right!
Nice.
And I got really excited about that because, like, there's so much symbolism in Crimson Peak, and I mean, it's Guillermo del Toro. It's what Haunted Mansion was supposed to be before they were like, no, this is too far. There's like there is color symbolism throughout the production, and it, you know, it's like the red they use for the blood, and blue, they use a blue filter a lot on most of the cinematography of like the house and of Tom Hiddleston's character and Jessica Chastain's character, and they dress them in a lot of like dark blues as well. And then what's her name, Edith, I think, her character is always in like these golds and whites and yellows, and like, I don't know, I just love that movie so much. Anyway, instead of, you know, the bloody chamber is like the system under the house where where she finds evidence of his other dead wives. And I was just like, yes! And spoiler alert, she fucking murders his ass in the end. Even though she loves him, she fucking murders his ass, and it's amazing.
We love it.
And you can see Tom Hiddleston's ass.
Oh, I love it. We love it. We love to see it.
And that's what I got.
Holy
That's
hell.
what I wanted to come back to, is that in all of these stories, the bride was always getting saved by someone else, usually men. So there's still a lack of agency or a lack of ability of the woman to save herself.
I'm proud of her. She made it out. In all of them, I would prefer that, you know, she gank Bluebeard's ass, or
Right.
the proxy of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right after the story, when I said, let's come back to the
Mhm.
the women having agency thing, that was it. I was like, it's always the men saving her, though. It's not. There's still some need for a woman to be saved or to be taken care of by men. And that made me want to kick a door in.
Sometimes it's an example of a woman saving themselves from harm by being like, oh,
Yeah.
won't a man help me?
Yeah.
So she also has power there. If she thinks she's incapable of physically overcoming another person,
Yeah.
then she could be like, oh my God. You know, manipulation is also a powerful tool.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I was like,
Yes.
I don't know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I didn't really get that from the story I read, but
No.
yeah.
But like, if that were the case.
And that's fine. We've all done that before. Most of the time.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, not most of the time. Just there are times. For example, at work, I'm legitimately known as the jar opener
Yeah.
because I have a strong grip. But then at home, I'm like, I can't open this.
Yeah. You were my chart opener before Shannon got here.
Yeah, I do be opening jars. Anyway,
But I also have literally no grip strength anymore, so
that's true.
it's a my carpal tunnel.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Thank you for this learning experience.
I just really like that story.
You're welcome, Hannah. No problem, Georgia.
And I think it's had a lot of cool little fun adaptations to come out of it, so
Those for you.
thanks. End of discussion. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Wait, come see us in Champaign.
Come see us in Champaign at the Dark History and Horror Convention, August 31st and September 1st at the Orpheum Theater.
We'll be the ones in a big tent inside. Putting a tent inside? That's crazy!
It's wacky.
We're wacky.
Your mom's wacky.
Okay, bye.
Well, that concludes this week's broadcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you wish to stay in touch, reach out to us at broadcastfromthebelfry@gmail.com or stalk us on Instagram at broadcastfromthebelfry. Again, I hope you've enjoyed our little show. Please rate and review. And until next week, stay